Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, we're diving into a topic that many of you have asked about.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Artificial Fluency Podcast, the podcast designed to help you take your English from good to great. I'm your host, Emma, and I'm so happy you've decided to spend some time with me today. Today, we are diving into a topic that is incredibly relevant for so many of you: culture shock. Have you ever dreamed of living in another country, maybe to study, to work, or just for an adventure? Or perhaps you are already living abroad and experiencing a new culture right now. If so, this episode is especially for you. Culture shock is that feeling of confusion, surprise, or even frustration that people experience when they move to a country or a place that is different from what they are used to. It's a fascinating and challenging experience. We're going to talk about what it is, the different stages people usually go through, and most importantly, we'll learn lots of useful vocabulary and phrases so you can talk about it confidently in English. This will be great for your listening practice, so grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's begin. Okay, so what exactly is culture shock? The shock part of the name can sound a little dramatic, can't it? It makes it sound like a sudden negative event, but it's usually more of a process, a journey with ups and downs. Experts often describe this journey in 4 main stages. We're going to explore each one. The 4 stages are the honeymoon phase, the frustration phase, the adjustment phase, and finally, the mastery phase. Let's start with the best one, shall we? The first stage is called the honeymoon phase. A honeymoon is the holiday that a newly married couple takes, and it's full of excitement, happiness, and romance. This phase of culture shock is very similar. When you first arrive in a new country, everything is exciting. The sights, the smells, the sounds, they are all new and fascinating. You might find the architecture beautiful, the local markets colorful and vibrant, and the people friendly and welcoming. I remember when I first spent a summer studying in Italy. For the first 2 weeks, I was completely in love. The language sounded like music, the food was the best I'd ever tasted, and even the way people drove their little scooters seemed charming and full of life. I was taking pictures of everything. I spent my days just walking around, soaking up the atmosphere. To soak up the atmosphere, that's a great phrase. It means to enjoy the feeling or character of a place. In this honeymoon phase, you tend to focus on all the positive things. The differences between your culture and the new one seem interesting and exotic. You might feel thrilled to be on this big adventure. The novelty of everything is powerful. Novelty is the quality of being new, original, or unusual. You are probably very polite and friendly to everyone you meet, and you're motivated to learn and explore. You're a tourist in your new life, and it feels wonderful. For many people, this period can last for a few weeks or even a few months. You feel energetic, optimistic, and you believe that you've made the best decision of your life. It's a beautiful feeling, but as the name phase suggests, it doesn't last forever. Vocabulary focus 1: excitement and novelty. Okay, let's pause for our first vocabulary focus. I'm going to highlight a few words and phrases we just used to talk about the honeymoon phase. I'll say the word, give a simple definition, and an example sentence. Try to repeat the word after me. First word, fascinating. Pause. Fascinating. It's an adjective, meaning extremely interesting. Example: the history of the city was absolutely fascinating. Next, to soak up the atmosphere. Pause. To soak up the atmosphere. This is a great idiom. It means to fully experience the character and feeling of a place. Example: We just sat at a cafe in the main square, soaking up the atmosphere. Next, thrilled. Pause. Thrilled. An adjective meaning very excited and happy. Example, I was thrilled to hear that I got the job abroad. Next, novelty. Pause. Novelty. This is a noun. It means the quality of being new, fresh, and different. Example, in the first month, the novelty of living in Japan was amazing. Everything was new. And finally, exotic. Pause. Exotic, an adjective we use to describe something that seems unusual and exciting because it comes from a different country. Example, she loves trying exotic fruits she can't find in her home country. Great job. These are perfect words to describe that initial wonderful feeling of arriving somewhere new. But what happens when the novelty wears off? That brings us to our next stage. This next stage is often the most difficult, and it's where the shock in culture shock really happens. It's called the frustration phase, or sometimes the negotiation phase. After the initial excitement fades, reality starts to set in. The things that you once found charming or exotic might now start to get on your nerves. To get on your nerves is an idiom that means to annoy you. For example, remember those little scooters in Italy I thought were so charming? After a month, when I was trying to cross the street and they were speeding past me, they didn't seem so charming anymore. They were just noisy and dangerous. This is the stage where small difficulties can feel like huge problems. You might struggle with the language barrier more than you expected. Simple tasks like going to the supermarket, setting up a bank account, or understanding public transport can become stressful and exhausting. You might feel incompetent, like you can't do anything right. The cultural differences become more obvious and can lead to misunderstandings. Maybe people in the new culture are much more direct or much more indirect than you are used to. Maybe their concept of time is different. If you come from a culture where being on time is very important, and you move to a place where being 30 minutes late is normal, it can be very frustrating. In this phase, it's common to feel negative emotions. You might feel isolated, lonely, or anxious. And very often, people start to feel homesick. Homesick is the feeling of sadness because you're away from your home and you miss your family and friends. You start to miss the familiarity of your own culture, your food, your music, your language, your friends. You might start to idealize your home country, thinking everything there is perfect and criticizing the new culture. It's a really tough period. You might feel irritable, tired, and you might even question why you moved in the first place. The key thing to remember is that this is a completely normal and natural part of the process of adapting to a new environment. Almost everyone who lives abroad for a significant period goes through this.
Okay, time for our second vocabulary focus. This vocabulary is very useful for describing difficult situations, not just culture shock. Let's practice. First phrase, to get on your nerves. To get on your nerves. It means to annoy or irritate you. Example, the constant noise from the construction site is really starting to get on my nerves. Next word, overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, an adjective. It means to feel that something is too much to handle, like you have too many things to deal with. Example, when I first started my new job, I felt overwhelmed by all the new information. Next, isolated. Isolated, an adjective. It means being or feeling alone and separate from other people. Example, it's easy to feel isolated in a big city if you don't know anyone. Next, homesick. Homesick, an adjective that describes the feeling of missing your home when you are away from it. Example, After a month away, the student started to feel very homesick. And finally, frustrated. Frustrated, an adjective for feeling annoyed or upset because you cannot achieve something or do something you want to do. Example, he was frustrated because he couldn't express his ideas clearly in English. Excellent! It's so important to have the right words to describe how you're feeling. Acknowledging these feelings is the first step to moving past them, which leads us to our next stage. Welcome back! We've talked about the exciting honeymoon phase and the difficult frustration phase. So how do you get through this difficult period? You entered the third stage, the adjustment phase. This is where things start to get better. Gradually, slowly, you begin to adjust. You start to understand the new culture more deeply. You learn the rules, the customs, the way people interact. Simple tasks are no longer a source of stress. You know which bus to take, you can order your coffee confidently, and you can have a simple conversation with your neighbor. You start to develop routines. You find your favorite park, your favorite coffee shop, maybe a grocery store that sells some food from your home country. These little things create a sense of familiarity and comfort. Your language skills improve, which is a huge factor. As you can communicate better, you feel less isolated. You might start to make friends, perhaps with other people from abroad or with local people. This is when you start to build a support system. In the adjustment phase, you haven't forgotten your own culture, but you are more able to accept the new one. You can see the good and the bad in both your home culture and your new culture. You stop comparing them so much. You start to feel more relaxed and positive. You develop a more balanced view of your new life. A key part of this stage is being patient with yourself. It's about understanding that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to not understand everything. You learn to laugh at your own misunderstandings. For example, maybe you used the wrong word and it was embarrassing at the time, but now you can see it as a funny story. This shows you are adapting. You are building resilience. All right, let's have our third and final vocabulary focus, all about adjusting and feeling better. Ready? First, to adjust. To adjust, a verb meaning to slowly get used to a new situation. Example, it took a few months to adjust to the new climate. Next, to get used to. To get used to something, a very common phrasal verb with the same meaning as to adjust. Example, I'm still getting used to waking up so early. Next, a sense of belonging. This is a noun phrase. It's the feeling that you are happy and comfortable in a place and with the people there. Example, joining the local football team gave him a real sense of belonging. Next, resilience. Resilience, a noun. It's the ability to become strong and successful again after a difficult situation or event. Example, moving abroad alone teaches you a lot of resilience. And our last one, to see things from a different perspective. To see things from a different perspective, an idiom, meaning to understand a situation from a different point of view. Example, living in another country helps you to see things from a different perspective. Fantastic work! These phrases really help to describe that positive journey of adaptation. This leads us to our final stage, number 4, the mastery phase, also known as the acceptance or adaptation phase. By this stage, you feel at home in your new country. This doesn't mean you've forgotten your own culture or where you came from. Instead, you've integrated parts of the new culture into your own identity. You can function successfully in both cultures. You are, in a way, bicultural. You feel comfortable, confident, and you can navigate daily life without the stress you felt before. You understand the nuances of the culture, the humor, the body language, the unspoken rules. You have a social network of friends. The new country now feels like another home. You might even experience something called reverse culture shock if you go back to your home country for a visit. You might find that you have changed and that your home country now feels a little strange to you. That's a sure sign that you have successfully adapted. This mastery phase is the goal. It's a feeling of accomplishment and deep understanding. It's the reward for pushing through the difficult frustration phase. So, let's do a quick recap of our journey through culture shock today. We started with stage 1, the honeymoon phase, where everything is new, exciting, and wonderful. Then we moved to the tough part, stage 2, the frustration phase, where we can feel overwhelmed, isolated, and homesick as we face the real challenges of a new culture. After that, things get better in stage 3, the adjustment phase, where we start to get used to our new environment, build routines, and feel more comfortable. And finally, we reach stage 4, the mastery phase, where we feel truly at home and can easily navigate both our new culture and our own. The most important thing to remember is that culture shock is normal. If you are experiencing it, be kind to yourself, be patient, try to learn the language, stay curious, and make an effort to connect with people. It's a challenging journey, but it's one that will help you grow into a more open-minded, resilient, and understanding person. I'd love to hear your stories about culture shock. Have you experienced it? What stage are you in now? What helped you to adjust? You can leave a comment on our website or on whatever platform you're listening on. Sharing your story might help someone else who is going through the same thing. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining me on Artificial Fluency Podcast. I hope you learned some useful language and feel more prepared to talk about this important topic. Join me next time when we'll be talking about a very practical skill, how to agree and disagree politely in English. It's essential for work, studies, and social life. Until then, keep practicing, stay curious, and I'll toss to you soon. Bye for now.
Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm your host, Emma, and today we have a special hour-long episode all about mindfulness and how it can revolutionize your language learning journey. Whether you're a beginner or approaching fluency, the principles of mindfulness can help you overcome common obstacles, reduce anxiety, and develop a deeper connection with English. So get comfortable, take a deep breath, and let's begin this exploration together. Before we dive into the fascinating connection between mindfulness and language learning, let's first understand what mindfulness actually is. Many people have heard the term, but there's often confusion about what it really means. At its core, mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment with openness, curiosity, and without judgment. It's about being fully aware of where we are, what we're doing, and not being overly reactive to what's happening around us. Jon Kabat-Zinn, one of the pioneers who brought mindfulness to mainstream Western culture, defines it as paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. This simple but profound practice has roots in ancient meditation traditions, but has been adapted for modern life and backed by extensive scientific research. So why are we talking about mindfulness on a language learning podcast? The connection might not seem obvious at first, but as we'll explore today, bringing mindfulness into your language practice can transform not just how you learn, but also how you experience the entire process. Let's start with some vocabulary related to mindfulness that you'll find useful both for today's episode and for discussing this topic in English. I'll explain each term and use it in a sentence. First, awareness. This means noticing what's happening inside and around you. Practicing language with awareness means noticing when you make errors without becoming discouraged. Present moment refers to what's happening right now, not in the past or future. When speaking English, try to stay in the present moment rather than worrying about what to say next. Non-judgmental means observing without labeling things as good or bad. Taking a non-judgmental approach to your accent helps reduce speaking anxiety. Attention is the focus of your conscious mind. Directing your attention to how native speakers use phrasal verbs can improve your understanding. Acceptance means acknowledging reality without resistance. Acceptance of the challenges in learning English is the first step toward overcoming them. Compassion is showing kindness toward suffering, including your own. Self-compassion is essential when you make mistakes in your language journey. Now that we have this vocabulary foundation, let's explore the specific ways mindfulness can enhance your language learning experience. One of the biggest challenges language learners face is something we rarely talk about, the emotional aspect of learning. Have you ever felt your heart racing when asked to speak English in front of others? Or that sinking feeling when you can't understand a native speaker? Or maybe the frustration of forgetting vocabulary you thought you knew? These emotional responses aren't just uncomfortable, They actively interfere with learning. When we experience stress or anxiety, our brain's fight or flight response activates. Blood flows away from our prefrontal cortex, the thinking, learning part of our brain, and towards systems needed for survival. This biological response made perfect sense when humans needed to escape predators, but it's not helpful when trying to conjugate verbs or remember vocabulary. This is where mindfulness comes in. Research has shown that regular mindfulness practice actually changes the brain in ways that help us manage emotions and stress. A 2011 study at Harvard found that just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice created measurable changes in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system for threat. Participants showed reduced activation in this area and reported feeling less stressed. For language learners, this means that mindfulness can help create the optimal emotional state for learning. When you're calm and centered, your prefrontal cortex remains engaged, allowing you to think clearly, recall information more easily, and process new language more effectively. Now, let's get practical. How can you actually incorporate mindfulness into your language learning routine? I'll share 5 powerful techniques that you can start using today. The first technique is mindful listening. This practice transforms how you engage with English audio material, whether it's podcasts like this one, songs, films, or conversations. Here's how to practice mindful listening. Choose a short audio clip, perhaps 2-3 minutes long. Before pressing play, take 3 deep breaths to center yourself. As you listen, give the audio your complete attention. Notice when your mind wanders and gently bring it back to the sounds. Don't worry about understanding everything. Just observe the sounds, rhythms, and patterns of the language. What makes this different from regular listening practice is the quality of attention. Rather than straining to understand every word or becoming frustrated when you don't, you're training your brain to stay present with the language, noticing details you might otherwise miss. Many students report that after practicing mindful listening regularly, they begin to naturally pick up on subtleties of pronunciation and intonation that they
Many students report that after practicing mindful listening regularly, they begin to naturally pick up on subtleties of pronunciation and intonation that they previously couldn't hear. Your brain becomes better at distinguishing sounds that don't exist in your native language. I recommend starting with just 5 minutes of mindful listening daily, gradually increasing as you become more comfortable with the practice. Let's try a brief mindful listening exercise right now. I'm going to play a short paragraph, and I invite you to listen with full attention. Don't worry about understanding every word. Just notice the sounds, rhythm, and your own experience of listening. The art of mindfulness transforms ordinary experiences into extraordinary ones. When we pay attention to the small details, the feeling of a breeze on our skin, the complex flavors in a simple meal, the subtle changes in another person's expression, we discover a richness in life that was always there, waiting to be noticed. The same principle applies to language. When we bring mindful attention to our practice, the language reveals its patterns, its music, and its beauty. How was that experience? Did you notice your mind wandering at any point? Did you observe any physical sensations as you listened? This level of awareness is exactly what we're cultivating through mindful listening. The second technique is mindful speaking. Many language learners experience anxiety when speaking, which can lead to the frustrating experience of knowing what to say, but feeling blocked or tongue-tied. Mindful speaking begins with awareness of your physical body before you start talking. Notice your posture, any tension in your shoulders or jaw, and your breathing pattern. Take a moment to feel your feet on the ground, which creates a sense of stability and presence. As you speak, pay attention to the physical sensations of forming the words. Feel the movement of your tongue, lips, and jaw. Notice the vibration in your throat and chest. This sensory awareness keeps you anchored in the present moment, rather than caught in worries about how you sound. Another aspect of mindful speaking is observing any self-critical thoughts without getting caught up in them. When you notice thoughts like, my pronunciation is terrible, or they're judging my grammar, simply acknowledge them with, there's a judgmental thought,
and gently return your attention to the physical experience of speaking. I recommend practicing mindful speaking first in low-pressure situations, perhaps recording yourself or speaking with a supportive language partner. As your comfort grows, you can bring this awareness into more challenging conversations. Many students report that mindful speaking not only reduces anxiety, but also improves their pronunciation as they become more aware of the physical aspects of producing sounds. Let's practice a brief mindful speaking exercise. I'll provide a simple prompt, and if you're in a place where you can speak aloud, I invite you to respond to it while practicing mindful speaking. If not, you can just imagine doing this exercise. The prompt is, describe your favorite place to relax. Before speaking, take 3 deep breaths, feel your feet on the ground, and notice any tension in your body, allowing it to release. As you speak, pay attention to the physical sensations of forming the words. Notice any judgmental thoughts that arise, acknowledging them without getting caught up in them. Focus on the experience of speaking rather than how good your English sounds. Even just 30 seconds of speaking with this kind of awareness can begin to shift your relationship with spoken English. Our third technique is mindful reading. Many language learners approach reading with the goal of finishing the text or understanding every word, which can create pressure and frustration. Mindful reading transforms this experience. Begin by choosing a text that's at an appropriate level for you, challenging enough to be interesting, but not so difficult that you need to look up every other word. Before you start reading, take a moment to center yourself with a few deep breaths. As you read, notice the tendency to rush or to get caught in trying to translate everything to your native language. When you find your mind racing ahead or struggling to grasp meaning, gently bring your attention back to the words on the page. Read at a pace that allows you to actually see each word. One particularly effective mindful reading technique is to read aloud slowly, feeling the shape of each word in your mouth. This engages multiple senses and creates a deeper connection with the language. Another approach is to read the same short passage several times, noticing new details with each reading. You might focus on different aspects. First, the general meaning, then specific vocabulary, then grammatical structures, and finally, the rhythm and flow of the language. Many students find that mindful reading leads to better comprehension and retention, as well as a more enjoyable experience with the language. Let's practice a brief mindful reading exercise. I'll share a short paragraph, and I invite you to read it slowly and mindfully, perhaps even aloud if you're in a place where you can do so. Learning a language is not just about mastering vocabulary and grammar. It's about entering a new world of expression, connecting with different ways of thinking, and expanding your own identity. Each new word you learn is not just information to memorize, but a tool that allows you to share more of yourself and understand more of others. The journey of language learning is as much about discovering yourself as it is about communicating with others. As you read, did you notice any tendency to rush? Were you able to stay present with each word? Did any particular phrases stand out to you? This awareness is what makes mindful reading such a powerful practice. The fourth technique we'll explore is mindful vocabulary practice. Traditional vocabulary methods often focus on quantity, how many words you can memorize. Mindful vocabulary practice emphasizes quality of attention and creating meaningful connections with fewer words. Instead of trying to memorize long lists, choose 5 to 7 new words that are relevant to your life and interests. For each word, take time to explore it fully. Say it aloud, feeling the shape of it in your mouth. Write it down slowly, noticing the movement of your hand. Create a personal example sentence that has emotional significance for you. You might also engage your imagination. Visualize a scene that represents the word. Create a mental story featuring the word, or connect it with a physical gesture. These multi-sensory associations create stronger neural pathways for remembering the word. Another mindful approach is to notice related words and how they connect to concepts you already know. How does this new vocabulary fit into your existing knowledge network? This creates what learning scientists call elaborative encoding, which significantly improves retention. Many learners report that by studying fewer words with greater attention, they actually remember more and can use the vocabulary more naturally in conversation. Let's try a brief mindful vocabulary exercise with the word serene, S-E-R-E-N-E, which means calm, peaceful, and untroubled. First, say the word aloud slowly. Serene. Notice how your mouth forms the sounds. Now, close your eyes if it's comfortable and create a mental image that represents serenity for you. It might be a quiet lake at sunrise, a peaceful garden, or any setting that embodies calmness for you. Next, connect the word to a personal experience. When have you felt serene? What were the physical sensations, emotions, and circumstances of that experience? Finally, create a meaningful sentence with the word. After practicing mindfulness for 10 minutes, I felt completely serene and ready to practice my English. This deep, multi-sensory engagement with a single word creates much stronger memory traces than quickly reviewing dozens of words. The fifth technique is mindful grammar practice. Grammar can be one of the most frustrating aspects of language learning, often leading to overthinking and anxiety when speaking. Traditional grammar study focuses on memorizing rules and doing mechanical exercises. Mindful grammar practice takes a different approach, emphasizing awareness and pattern recognition over memorization. Begin by choosing one grammatical structure to focus on, like the present perfect tense. Rather than starting with rules, expose yourself to many examples of this structure in authentic context, perhaps by reading a short story or listening to a dialogue where it appears frequently. As you encounter the structure, notice how it's used and what meaning it conveys. When does the speaker choose this form instead of another? What feeling or perspective does it express? This curious observation is very different from trying to apply memorized rules. Once you've developed this intuitive feeling for the structure, then look at the formal rule. You'll likely find that it makes much more sense because you've already begun to develop a feel for the pattern. When practicing, bring full attention to forming the structure correctly, noticing any resistance or confusion that arises. Rather than judging these difficulties, simply observe them with curiosity, like, oh, I notice I'm struggling with the word order here, or I see I automatically used simple past instead of present perfect. This mindful approach can transform grammar from a source of anxiety to an interesting exploration of how the language works. Let's practice mindful grammar with the short exercise focusing on the present perfect tense. I'll provide several examples of the structure in context. As you read or listen to them, pay attention to the feeling or meaning that this tense conveys, rather than trying to recall formal rules. I've lived in Paris for 3 years. She's never tried sushi before. They've just arrived at the airport. We've been studying English since January. He's already finished the assignment. What patterns do you notice? What kind of situations call for this tense? You might observe that it connects past events to the present moment in some way. This intuitive understanding, developed through mindful observation, provides a much stronger foundation than memorizing rules alone. Now that we've explored 5 specific mindfulness techniques for language learning, let's take a step back and look at how to integrate mindfulness more broadly into your learning routine. One powerful approach is to begin each study session with a brief mindfulness practice. Just 2 to 3 minutes of focused breathing creates a transition from your busy day to your learning time, helping your brain shift into a more receptive state. Here's a simple routine you might try. Sit comfortably and bring your attention to your breathing for about 10 breaths. Then, set a clear, positive intention for your study session, such as, I'm going to explore these new words with curiosity, or I will practice speaking with awareness and patience. This creates a purposeful, centered approach to your practice. Throughout your study time, build in short, mindful pauses. After completing an exercise or reading a passage, take 30 seconds to breathe and check in with yourself. Notice if you're becoming tense, frustrated, or distracted, and gently reset your attention before continuing. End your session with a brief reflection, acknowledging what you accomplished without judgment. This mindful bookending of your study time establishes a healthy relationship with the learning process. Let's practice a brief mindfulness exercise that you can use before studying. I'll guide you through it, and if you're in a place where you can close your eyes and participate, I invite you to do so. If not, just listen to the instructions and try it later. Begin by sitting comfortably, feet flat on the floor if possible. Allow your spine to be upright but not rigid. Take 3 deep breaths, exhaling fully each time. Now, allow your breathing to find its natural rhythm and bring your attention to the physical sensation of the breath entering and leaving your body. You might notice the feeling of air at your nostrils, the rising and falling of your chest, or the expansion and contraction of your abdomen. When you notice your mind wandering to thoughts, plans, or worries, gently bring your attention back to the breath. There's no need to criticize yourself when your mind wanders. This is what minds naturally do. Continue following your breath for a few moments. Now, set an intention for your English practice today. It might be to approach challenges with patience, to notice new aspects of the language, or simply to be present with the learning process. Slowly bring your awareness back to the room, perhaps wiggling your fingers and toes, and when you're ready, open your eyes if they were closed. This simple practice, taking just 2 to 3 minutes, can significantly change the quality of your study time. Now that we've explored 5 specific mindfulness techniques for language learning, let's take a step back and look at how to integrate mindfulness more broadly into your learning routine. One powerful approach is to begin each study session with a brief mindfulness practice. Just 2 to 3 minutes of focused breathing creates a transition from your busy day to your learning time, helping your brain shift into a more receptive state. Here's a simple routine you might try. Sit comfortably and bring your attention to your breathing for about 10 breaths. Then set a clear, positive intention for your study session, such as, I'm going to explore these new words with curiosity, or I will practice speaking with awareness and patience. This creates a purposeful, centered approach to your practice. Throughout your study time, build in short, mindful pauses. After completing an exercise or reading a passage, take 30 seconds to breathe and check in with yourself. Notice if you're becoming tense, frustrated, or distracted, and gently reset your attention before continuing.
In the first half of our episode, we've covered the foundations of mindfulness for language learning and explored 5 specific techniques. Now, let's dive deeper into some of the challenges language learners face and how mindfulness can help address them. One of the most common obstacles is the inner critic, that judgmental voice in your head that comments on your performance, compares you to others, and often focuses on what you're doing wrong rather than right. Have you noticed this voice when you speak English? What kinds of things does it say? The inner critic typically makes statements like, "My accent sounds ridiculous. I should be more fluent by now. Everyone else in the class is better than me. I keep making the same mistakes over and over."
Native speakers must think I'm unintelligent when I speak. These thoughts aren't just unpleasant, they actively interfere with learning by creating anxiety and self-consciousness that make it harder to take risks and practice freely. Mindfulness offers a powerful approach to working with the inner critic. The first step is simply becoming aware of these thoughts as they arise. With practice, you can learn to recognize critical thoughts as just thoughts, not facts or reality. The traditional mindfulness instruction is to notice the thought, label it, there's self-criticism, and then gently return your attention to whatever you were doing, whether speaking, listening, reading, or writing in English. Over time, this practice creates space between you and your thoughts. Rather than being completely identified with the inner critic, you develop the ability to observe it with some distance. You might even bring some curiosity or compassion to these thoughts. That's interesting. My mind is being really hard on me right now. I wonder what's behind that. Let's practice working with the inner critic through a brief exercise. Think of a recent situation where you felt self-critical about your English. Perhaps you made a mistake while speaking, couldn't understand something, or compared yourself negatively to others. First, notice the specific thoughts that arose in that situation. What exactly did your inner critic say? Now see if you can identify the emotions that accompanied these thoughts. Did you feel embarrassment, shame, frustration, or something else? Next, try rephrasing the critical thought with more kindness and perspective. For example, I'm terrible at pronunciation might become, pronunciation is challenging for many learners and I'm still developing this skill. This isn't about positive thinking or denying difficulties. It's about relating to your experience with greater awareness and compassion, which creates a healthier learning environment. Another major challenge for language learners is the phenomenon known as the plateau. That frustrating period where, despite continued effort, you don't seem to be making progress. Many language learners experience this at the intermediate stage, which is sometimes called the intermediate plateau. The plateau often triggers a cycle of demotivation. You don't see progress, so you become discouraged, which leads to less effective practice, which results in even less progress. Adding to the challenge, your awareness of the language has increased, so you're more conscious of your mistakes and limitations than you were as a beginner. Mindfulness offers several ways to navigate the plateau more skillfully. First, it helps you recognize that progress isn't always linear or immediately visible. By practicing present moment awareness, you can engage fully with your current learning experience without constantly evaluating whether you're getting better. Second, mindfulness cultivates equanimity, the ability to stay balanced in the face of both pleasant and unpleasant experiences, which helps you continue practicing consistently even when you don't feel the immediate reward of noticeable improvement. Third, the practice of non-judgment allows you to observe your current abilities without labeling them as good enough or not good enough. This creates a more objective view of where you actually are in your learning journey. Many students find that the plateau isn't actually a complete lack of progress, but rather a shift in how progress happens, becoming less obvious, but often deeper and more integrated. Mindfulness helps you appreciate these subtle changes that might otherwise go unnoticed. Here's a practice for working with the plateau experience. Take a sheet of paper and draw a line down the middle. On the left side, list the aspects of English that feel challenging or stagnant right now. On the right side, note any small signs of progress or growth you've experienced in the past month, no matter how subtle. These might include understanding a few more words in a film without subtitles, feeling slightly more comfortable with a particular grammar structure, noticing patterns in the language that you didn't before, having slightly longer conversations before feeling tired, learning a few new expressions that you've successfully used. The key is to train your awareness to notice these small shifts, which are often obscured when we focus only on dramatic improvements. This balanced perspective keeps motivation alive during plateau periods. A third challenge many language learners face is something we might call compartmentalization, the tendency to separate language learning from the rest of life, treating it as just another subject to study rather than a living skill to integrate into your identity. This compartmentalization often leads to a disconnect between classroom learning and real-world use. You might perform well on exercises or tests, but freeze up in authentic conversations. Or you might find yourself translating in your head rather than thinking directly in English. Mindfulness practices can help bridge this gap by training you to bring awareness of the language into everyday life. Here are a few approaches that students have found particularly effective. First, practice language mindfulness during routine activities. Choose an everyday task like cooking, walking, or commuting, and narrate what you're doing or seeing in English, either out loud or mentally. This helps integrate the language into your normal experience rather than keeping it confined to study time. Second, create mindful triggers throughout your day. Specific cues that remind you to switch into English. For example, you might decide that every time you open a door, wait for an elevator, or wash your hands, you'll think in English for the next 30 seconds. These brief but frequent moments of language immersion add up significantly over time. Third, practice mindful language shifting, the transition between your native language and English. Notice what happens in your mind and body when you switch languages. Is there tension, excitement, a change in your sense of identity? This awareness itself helps make the transition more fluid over time. Let's practice integrating language into everyday life with a simple exercise. Choose an object you can see right now in your environment. It could be anything. A cup, a book, your phone, a plant. Now, for the next 30 seconds, observe this object carefully and describe it mentally in English. Notice its physical characteristics, its purpose, its history, your relationship with it, anything that comes to mind. This kind of practice, repeated throughout your day with different objects and experiences, gradually trains your brain to process everyday life directly in English rather than always filtering through your native language. So far, we've explored how mindfulness can enhance various aspects of language learning and help overcome common challenges. Now let's look at how to develop a consistent mindfulness practice that supports your language goals. Many people are enthusiastic about mindfulness initially, but struggle to maintain a regular practice. The key is to start small and integrate mindfulness into your existing routines rather than trying to add another major commitment to your busy life. Begin with just 3 to 5 minutes of mindfulness daily, perhaps first thing in the morning or right before your language practice. There are many excellent apps that offer guided mindfulness exercises, or you can simply set a timer and focus on your breathing. Once you've established this basic practice, look for opportunities to bring mindful awareness into your language activities. Remember the techniques we discussed earlier: mindful listening, speaking, reading, vocabulary practice, and grammar study. You don't need to use all of these approaches at once. Maybe choose one to focus on each week. Another effective strategy is to join or create a mindful language learning group. Meeting regularly with others who share your interest in this approach provides accountability, encouragement, and the opportunity to practice mindful speaking in a supportive environment. Remember that mindfulness itself is a skill that develops gradually with practice. You might not notice dramatic benefits immediately, but with consistent attention, you'll likely observe subtle shifts in your relationship with language learning. Less anxiety, more enjoyment, deeper engagement, and eventually, more natural fluency. As we begin to wrap up our exploration of mindfulness for language learning, I'd like to share a simple daily practice plan that integrates the approaches we've discussed. Morning. Begin with 3 to 5 minutes of mindful breathing to center yourself for the day. Throughout the day, use mindful triggers to briefly think or speak in English during routine activities. Language study time. Start with 2 minutes of mindful breathing and setting an intention. Choose one aspect of language to practice mindfully, perhaps vocabulary one day, listening another. And with a brief reflection on what you noticed during practice. Evening. Take 5 minutes to journal in English about your day, bringing mindful awareness to the writing process. Weekly. Join a language exchange or conversation group where you can practice mindful speaking with others. This integrated approach weaves mindfulness and language learning throughout your day rather than treating them as separate activities. Before we conclude, I'd like to address some common questions and misconceptions about mindfulness for language learning. Do I need to meditate for hours to see benefits? Absolutely not. Research shows that even short, regular practices can create significant changes in the brain. Start with just a few minutes daily and build gradually if you wish. Is mindfulness religious or spiritual? While mindfulness has roots in contemplative traditions, the practices we've discussed are secular and supported by scientific research. People of any faith or no faith can benefit from mindfulness techniques. I'm too busy to add another practice to my routine. Rather than viewing mindfulness as another task on your to-do list, think of it as a quality of attention you bring to activities you're already doing. Even bringing mindful awareness to 3 breaths several times a day can begin to shift your experience. My mind is too active to meditate. Having an active mind is completely normal and doesn't mean you're bad at mindfulness. The practice isn't about stopping thoughts, but rather noticing them without getting caught up in them. Every time you notice your mind has wandered and bring it back to the present moment, that's the practice working, not failing. Will mindfulness make me too relaxed to push myself in learning? Mindfulness isn't about passive relaxation, but rather about engaged, aware presence. Many people find they actually study more effectively and push themselves in healthier ways when practicing mindfulness, because they're more aware of both their capabilities and limitations. As we come to the end of today's episode, I'd like to leave you with a reflection on the deeper purpose of language learning. Beyond the practical benefits of being able to communicate in English, learning a new language offers a profound opportunity for personal growth and expanded consciousness. When you learn a new language, you're not just acquiring a skill, you're developing a new lens through which to see the world. Each language encodes particular ways of thinking, feeling, and relating that shape the experience of its speakers. By entering into English, you gain access to these new perspectives. Mindfulness enhances this journey by helping you fully experience the language rather than just study it. When you bring aware presence to your practice, you notice subtleties of meaning, emotional resonances, and cultural contexts that might otherwise pass you by. Perhaps most importantly, both mindfulness and language learning invite you to step outside your habitual patterns, to become aware of how you normally perceive and interact with the world, and to explore new possibilities. Both practices involve a willingness to be a beginner, to make mistakes, to feel uncomfortable, and to gradually develop new capacities through patient attention. In this sense, mindful language learning isn't just about becoming fluent in English, it's about becoming more fully human, more aware, more connected to yourself and others. And that, I believe, is the greatest gift that both mindfulness and languages have to offer. Thank you for joining me for this special hour-long exploration of mindfulness for language learning. I hope you've discovered approaches that resonate with you and that you'll experiment with in your own practice. Next week, we'll return to our regular 30-minute format with an episode about English idioms related to nature, expressions like the early bird catches the worm and barking up the wrong tree. Until then, I encourage you to bring mindful awareness to your language journey, moment by moment, breath by breath. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with fellow language learners who might benefit. And remember, the path to fluency isn't just about how much you study, it's about how you show up for the learning process, with awareness, patience, curiosity, and compassion. This is Emma from Artificial Fluency, wishing you mindful moments and joyful discoveries on your language journey. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Welcome to the Artificial Fluency Podcast. I'm Emma. Before we begin, let me ask you a few questions. Have you ever spent a day in the countryside? What did you do there? How did it feel to be away from the busy city? Try to answer these questions in your mind as you listen today. In this episode, we will hear a real-life story about a trip to the countryside. While listening, you will improve your listening skills by focusing on natural English. And you'll also improve your writing because you can try to describe the story in your own words after listening. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel, the English Pod community, we upload videos every day to help you improve your English. So press the like button and stay with us to learn real English from real stories. Let's begin with today's story. Last weekend, I visited a small village called Green Hill with my wife. We wanted to take a break from the noisy city and spend some quiet time in nature. The village was about 2 hours away from our home. The drive was peaceful. We passed green fields, small rivers, and even a few cows walking near the road. When we reached the village, the air felt fresh and cool. It was quiet. No traffic, no loud sounds, just the wind and the birds. We stayed at a small guest house run by a man named Mr. Thomas. He was around 60 years old and had lived in Green Hill all his life. He welcomed us with a warm smile and offered us fresh apple juice from his own farm. I had never tasted anything so fresh before. It was sweet, cold, and perfect after the long drive. Later, we went for a walk through the fields. My wife pointed out different plants and flowers. She loves gardening, so she was excited to see wild herbs growing naturally. At one point, we met an old lady named Mrs. Clara who was collecting firewood. She smiled and said, "You two must be from the city. You walk too fast." That made us laugh. It's true. In the city, we walk quickly and always look at our phones. But in the countryside, everything is slower. People take their time. They enjoy the moment. In the evening, Mr. Thomas invited us to have dinner with his family. They served us rice, lentils, fresh vegetables, and homemade bread. It reminded me of my childhood when my mother used to cook simple but delicious meals. After dinner, we sat outside under the stars. There were no streetlights, so we could see the night sky clearly. It was beautiful. I had forgotten how peaceful silence could be. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds and a rooster. I felt rested and calm. Before we left, Mr. Thomas gave us a small basket of apples to take home. He said, "Take these as a gift from the village." That simple sentence touched me. It reminded me that kindness doesn't need to be big. Even small things can mean a lot. Now, think about this. Have you ever visited a village or the countryside? What did you see, hear, and feel? How was it different from your daily life? Would you like to go back again someday? Try to answer these in your notebook. You can also write a short paragraph about your own countryside experience, or imagine one if you've never been. This will help improve your writing and thinking in English. The next day, after we said goodbye to Mr. Thomas and Mrs. Clara, we took a long walk around the village. It was peaceful. The streets were so quiet that we could hear the wind blowing through the trees. We passed small houses with gardens full of flowers and vegetables. Some of the villagers were sitting outside, chatting with each other. One of the things I noticed about the countryside was how everyone seemed to know each other. In the city, we don't always speak to our neighbors. But in the village, people greet each other every morning. It felt warm and friendly. It reminded me of when I was a child, and everyone in my neighborhood knew each other. We also visited a small lake near the village. The water was clear, and there were ducks swimming happily. We sat by the shore and watched them for a while. It was nice to just sit and relax without feeling rushed. During our time in Green Hill, I also realized how much I had missed nature. I live in a busy city, And sometimes we forget how important it is to connect with the natural world. Being surrounded by trees, fields, and animals made me feel more calm and at peace. Later, we decided to try a local tradition. There's a festival in Green Hill every year where people celebrate the harvest. This time, the festival was a few days away, but we were lucky enough to see some early preparations. Villagers were decorating the streets with flowers and hanging lights. It looked beautiful, and everyone seemed excited. My wife, Sarah, was especially excited about the food. She loves trying new dishes, and the village was known for its homemade cheese and fresh bread. We visited a small shop run by a friendly woman named Linda, who made the cheese herself. We bought a piece, and Sarah couldn't wait to try it. That night, we stayed in a cozy little cabin just outside the village. It was simple, but it had everything we needed. The air was so fresh that we kept the windows open all night. I remember waking up in the middle of the night to the sound of an owl hooting nearby. It was a peaceful sound. The next morning, we were ready to leave. We packed our bags and said goodbye to the village. As we drove back to the city, I couldn't help but feel grateful for the time we spent there. It had been a short trip, but it was exactly what we needed. Now I want you to think for a moment. When was the last time you spent time in nature? What did you do? How did it make you feel? Try to describe it in English. What kind of natural surroundings do you like? Do you prefer the mountains, the beach, or the countryside? Try to write a few sentences about your experience. This will help you practice your English writing skills and also help you express yourself in more detail. What would your perfect trip to the countryside look like? Would you go hiking, visit a small village, or maybe just relax by a lake? Think about the details. What would you see, hear, and do? Write down your thoughts in English. As we continued our time in Green Hill, something special happened. Mr. Thomas told us about his neighbor, David, who owned a small piece of farmland just outside the village. David was in his early 50s, friendly, with a kind face and a calm voice. He invited us to visit his farm, and we happily agreed. We followed a narrow path that led to his land. Along the way, we saw chickens walking freely and a few goats, resting under a tree. The sun was shining, but it wasn't too hot. The air smelled fresh, like grass and flowers. When we reached the farm, David was already waiting for us. He waved and said, "Welcome to my little world." David showed us around. He had apple trees, rows of carrots, tomatoes, and even some pumpkins growing. He explained how he takes care of the plants every day, waking up before sunrise and working until late afternoon. He told us that life on a farm is not easy, but it's honest work. He said, "The land gives you what you give it. If you take care of it, it will take care of you." We helped him water the plants for a while. It wasn't hard, but it made me think about how much time and care farmers put into their work. We also helped him collect eggs from the chicken coop. My wife Sarah was nervous at first because she had never done that before, but David guided her step by step. She smiled when she held a warm egg in her hand for the first time. After the farm visit, David invited us to sit under a big tree near the edge of the field. He brought out a basket with homemade bread, some cheese, and boiled eggs. We sat on a blanket and had a simple countryside lunch. It was quiet. We could hear the wind in the leaves and birds singing in the distance. David told us stories about his childhood. He had grown up in Green Hill and had never left. He said, "Some people like big cities, tall buildings, and busy streets. But me? I like to wake up with the sound of birds and go to sleep with the stars above." His words were simple, but they stayed in my mind. Later that day, we visited a small shop in the village center. It was run by a man named Edward, who made wooden tools and furniture. He showed us how he carved a piece of wood into a spoon. He used only a knife in his hands. Every movement was slow and careful. "It takes time," he said, "but when it's finished, you know it's made with care." Edward told us he had learned this skill from his father and now teaches it to his own son. I could see how proud he was of his work. I picked up one of his handmade chairs and it felt strong and smooth. He said, "Things made by hand carry the spirit of the person who made them." That evening, we joined a small group of villagers who were sitting near the community well. They were talking, sharing stories, and laughing together. An old man named Mr. Henry shared a story about how he once got lost in the forest when he was a boy, and how a dog led him back to the village. Everyone laughed, and one of the younger boys asked, "Is that really true?" Mr. Henry just smiled and said, "Maybe." The moment was so special. No one was looking at a phone. No one was rushing. People were just present, enjoying each other's company. That's something I rarely see in the city. There, everyone is in a hurry, always looking at the clock. But in Green Hill, time moved slowly and every moment mattered. Before going to bed, Sarah and I sat on the porch of the guest house. We watched the stars again. It was our last night there. She said, "I feel like I can breathe better here. Life is so peaceful." I nodded. I felt the same way. Being away from noise, stress, and crowds helped me think clearly. It helped me appreciate the little things: fresh air, quiet nights, friendly people, and honest work. Now, I want you to imagine something. Imagine you are standing in a quiet village. You can hear the birds, feel the wind, and smell the fresh bread from a nearby house. What would you do? Who would you speak to? Would you go for a walk or help a farmer in the field? Would you sit near a lake or talk to an old man like Mr. Henry? Try to describe your own countryside trip. Use easy English. Write about what you saw, what you ate, and how you felt. This will help you think in English and improve your writing skills. Also, when you listen to a real story like this one, try to focus on how words are used. Listen for verbs, adjectives, and simple phrases. Repeat them. Try to use them in your own sentences. For example, the air felt fresh. The village was quiet. People were kind and friendly. We sat under a tree. These kinds of simple sentences are very powerful. They help you speak clearly and naturally in English. The next morning in Green Hill, something special happened. It wasn't big or loud, but it stayed in my memory clearly. After breakfast, Mr. Thomas invited us to help on his farm. At first, I was a little unsure. I had never worked on a farm before, but I thought, why not? It could be a good experience. Sarah smiled and said, "Let's do it. It sounds fun." So we changed into some old clothes that Mr. Thomas gave us. They were a bit big, but we didn't mind. He handed us each a pair of gloves and led us out to the field. The sun was already shining, but the morning air was still cool. You could hear birds chirping and the gentle sound of the wind moving through the grass. Mr. Thomas's farm was peaceful and full of life. There were rows of vegetables: carrots, potatoes, tomatoes, and onions. He showed us how to gently pull the carrots out of the ground and shake off the dirt. It was actually kind of fun. The soil was soft, and the carrots were big and orange. Sarah pulled one up and laughed. "Look at this one. It has 2 legs." We all laughed together. Then we moved on to picking tomatoes. Mr. Thomas said, "Pick the ones that are red and firm, not soft. Those are ready." It was a slow, steady job, but very calming. The fresh smell of the plants, the sunshine on our backs, and the kind words from Mr. Thomas made it a really relaxing time. After about an hour, we took a short break under a tree. Mrs. Thomas came out with cold lemonade and homemade cookies. They were sweet and buttery, with a little bit of cinnamon. We sat on a bench, sipping our drinks, looking out over the fields. Sarah leaned over to me and said, "I wish every day could feel this quiet." Later, Mr. Thomas showed us the chicken coop. There were about 20 chickens inside. He opened the small door and said, "Want to try collecting some eggs?" I wasn't sure at first, but he showed me how to reach into the straw and gently pick up the eggs without scaring the chickens. We each filled a small basket with fresh brown eggs. It felt so different from buying eggs at the store. Here, you could see where the food came from. After lunch, we decided to visit a nearby river. The river was just a short walk from the farm, and the path was lined with trees. It was quiet, and the only sound was the flowing water. When we arrived, we sat on the rocks near the edge and took off our shoes. The water was cool and refreshing. I dipped my feet in, and Sarah did the same. A boy named David came by with his dog, Max. He smiled and said, "This is the best place to cool down. Max loves swimming here." The dog jumped into the river and splashed around happily. We talked with David for a while. He was about 15 and said he helped his parents on their farm every weekend. He told us stories about fishing with his grandfather and catching frogs with his cousins. His stories were simple but full of joy. It reminded me of my own childhood, playing outside for hours without phones or screens. We asked David if he knew any good places to hike nearby. He pointed to a small hill across the river and said, "There's an old tree up there. People say it's over 100 years old. It's a nice spot to sit and see the sunset." We thanked him and decided to try it out. The hike wasn't too long, but it was a bit steep. As we climbed, I looked back and saw the whole village getting smaller behind us. You could see the farms, the little houses, and the church tower in the middle of the village. It was like a painting. When we reached the top, we saw the tree. It was big with strong branches and a thick trunk. Its leaves made a wide shadow, and we sat under it to rest. We watched the sun go down slowly. The sky turned orange, pink, and then deep purple. Sarah whispered, "It's like time has stopped." We didn't say much after that. We just sat in silence, listening to the wind in the leaves and watching the sky change color. As we walked back to the guest house in the dark, we used a small flashlight to see the path. The village was quiet. No loud cars, no traffic, no city noise, just peace. When we reached the guest house, Mr. Thomas met us at the door. He said, "You two look like you had a full day." We smiled and nodded. The next day was our last in Green Hill, so we wanted to do something special. We woke up early and visited the small village school. It was a one-room building, and the teacher, Mrs. Parker, was already there preparing her lessons. She welcomed us and said, "Would you like to meet the students? They love visitors." We agreed, and a few minutes later, about 10 children came into the room. They were between 6 and 10 years old, full of energy and curiosity. Mrs. Parker asked us to talk a little about our life in the city. I told them about my job, the tall buildings, and how busy the streets are. Sarah talked about working from home and taking care of the garden on weekends. Then the children asked questions. One girl named Emily asked, "Do you have cows in your city?" I laughed and said, "No, not really, but I saw some here yesterday." A boy named Ben asked, "Is it noisy in your city?" I said, "Very noisy. That's why I love the quiet here so much." We played a few games with the kids and helped them with a drawing activity. They were drawing pictures of their favorite places. Some drew the river, others the farms, or the big tree on the hill. I noticed one boy drew a picture of his family having dinner at home. I asked him about it, and he said, "We eat together every night. It's the best part of my day." Hearing that made me think. In the city, it's easy to forget these small but important moments. Eating together, playing outside, talking face to face. These things bring real happiness. Before we left, the children gave us a handmade thank you card. It said, "Thank you for visiting our school. Please come back again." It was a simple card, but it meant a lot. I put it carefully in my bag so I wouldn't lose it. That afternoon, we walked through the village one last time. We said goodbye to George at the shop, waved to David and Max near the river, and stopped by the cafe to thank Mark and Helen for their warm coffee and kind words. Everyone seemed to smile and say, "Come back soon." That evening, as I packed my bag, I thought about everything we had done. The fresh air, the people, the peaceful life, the animals, the school children, and even the vegetables we picked. It wasn't just a holiday. It was a chance to live differently, to slow down, and to see life in a new way. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever visited the countryside? What did you do there? What sounds did you hear? What kind of people did you meet? If you haven't visited yet, can you imagine what it would be like? Use your English to describe it. You don't need big words. Just share what you see in your mind. The next day, we decided to take a different kind of adventure. Instead of working on the farm or walking through the village, Mr. Thomas suggested we explore the nearby forest. Sarah and I were excited. The forest was known for its tall trees and peaceful atmosphere. Mr. Thomas said it was his favorite place to visit when he wanted to clear his mind. We started early in the morning. The weather was perfect, cool with a light breeze. As we walked along the dirt path, the trees around us grew taller and thicker. The sunlight barely reached the ground through the thick canopy above. It was like stepping into another world. The air smelled fresh, full of earth and leaves. And it was so quiet. The only sounds were the crunch of the leaves beneath our feet and the occasional birds singing high up in the trees. Mr. Thomas pointed out different plants and trees along the way. He told us that the forest was full of history. Some of the trees were hundreds of years old. He said that during the winter, the forest would be covered in snow, and it looked like something out of a fairy tale. He also mentioned that many people in the village came here to find peace and clear their minds. Sarah and I were happy to be a part of it. As we continued walking, we came across a small stream. The water was clear and flowed gently over smooth rocks. It made a soft, soothing sound. We stopped for a moment to rest and listen. Mr. Thomas said, "This is where I like to come and think. You can sit by the water and listen to the sounds of nature. It's very relaxing." We sat on some large rocks next to the stream and closed our eyes for a few minutes, just taking in the peace of the forest. The cool air, the sound of the water, and the quiet surroundings made everything feel calm. It was a nice change from the busy, noisy world we were used to. After a while, we continued walking along the path. The trees seemed to get even taller as we went deeper into the forest. Mr. Thomas told us about the wildlife in the area. He mentioned deer, rabbits, and even wild boars that lived in the forest. He also said that sometimes people would see foxes or squirrels jumping from tree to tree. We didn't see any animals that day, but it was still exciting to know they were out there somewhere. At one point, we reached a clearing in the forest. In the middle of the clearing was a huge, ancient oak tree. It was the biggest tree I had ever seen. Its trunk was thick, and its branches spread out wide, almost as if they were trying to touch the sky. Mr. Thomas said this was a special tree. He called it the heart of the forest. People from the village would come here sometimes to sit and think, or even have small celebrations. Sarah was fascinated by the tree. She walked around it, touching the rough bark and looking up at the branches. She said, "It's so big. I feel like it has its own story to tell." I agreed. The tree seemed old, wise, and full of secrets. I couldn't help but think about how many years it had stood there, watching everything around it change. Mr. Thomas told us that the tree had been there for more than 300 years. And in all that time, it had seen the village grow, the people come and go, and the world change in so many ways. We spent some time there, just sitting and enjoying the quiet. Mr. Thomas shared a story with us about his grandfather, who used to bring him to this spot when he was a boy. He said his grandfather believed the tree had a kind of magic to it. If you sat quietly and made a wish, the tree would grant it. Of course, Mr. Thomas wasn't sure if that was true, but he said it always made him feel good to sit under the tree and think about the future. It was amazing how much history was packed into that one place. It felt like time had stopped in the forest. There was no rush, no deadline, just the beauty of nature and the quiet of the woods. As we left the clearing and headed back to the village, we talked about how different life felt in Greenhill. In the city, everything was fast-paced. People were always in a hurry. But here, people took their time. They took care of their land, spent time with their families, and made time for the things that really mattered. I thought about my own life back home and how often I rushed through things. It made me wonder if I should slow down sometimes and focus on the small moments. That evening, we returned to the guest house and shared our experiences with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas. They were curious about our trip to the forest and loved hearing our stories. We told them about the big oak tree and how peaceful it was by the stream. Mrs. Thomas smiled and said, "You two have experienced something special. Not everyone gets to enjoy the forest in such a peaceful way." After dinner, we went outside to look at the stars. The sky was clear and the stars were bright. We lay on the grass for a while, just staring up at the sky. It was a perfect ending to a perfect day. As we lay there, I thought about all the things we had seen and done in Greenhill. It wasn't a place full of excitement or big events, but it was full of simple pleasures. Spending time with the Thomases, working on the farm, walking in the forest, and just enjoying nature. These were the things that made the trip memorable. And now, I want to ask you, what about you? Do you enjoy spending time in nature? Do you like hiking, walking by a stream, or simply sitting under a big tree? Imagine you are in the countryside right now. Can you describe what you see? What do you hear? What do you smell? Take a moment to picture it and try to use your English to explain it. You don't need to know all the words. Just focus on describing the things that matter to you. This is how you can practice speaking and writing English by sharing the small details of your life. The more you describe, the better you will get at using English to tell your own stories. Now, if you want to, you can close your eyes for a moment and think about your own ideal trip to the countryside. What would you do? What would you see? Try to use your imagination to practice your English. You could even write it down later, or tell a friend about it. The next morning, Sarah and I woke up early, feeling refreshed after a peaceful night's sleep. We could hear birds chirping outside the window and the sound of leaves rustling in the breeze. It was a beautiful day, and we were both excited to see more of Greenhill. Over breakfast, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas shared some ideas for the day. They mentioned taking a walk through the village and visiting some of the local spots, including the old chapel and the village market. It was clear that there was a lot to discover in this small, peaceful place. After breakfast, we put on our shoes and headed outside ready to explore. We started walking down the narrow road that led into the village. The houses were made of stone, with ivy climbing up the walls, and the gardens were full of flowers in every color. The air smelled fresh and clean, filled with the scent of flowers, grass, and the earth. The road was quiet, with only the sound of birds and the occasional passing car. As we walked, Mr. Thomas pointed out different places of interest. He told us that Greenhill had a long history. The village had been around for hundreds of years, and the people here took great pride in their traditions. He mentioned the local church, which had been built in the 1600s, and how it was a place where many important events in the village had taken place. We stopped for a moment to admire the church. It had tall stone walls and a beautiful bell tower that could be seen from almost anywhere in the village. Next, we walked to the village market, where many of the locals sold fresh produce, handmade goods, and homemade baked items. It was a small market, but it was full of life and color. The stands were packed with fresh vegetables, fruits, and flowers. There was a stall selling homemade bread and pastries, and the smell was so delicious that we couldn't resist buying a loaf of bread and some pastries to take with us. Sarah and I walked through the market, looking at everything the vendors had to offer. We stopped to talk to one of the local farmers who was selling fresh tomatoes. Mr. Thomas introduced us, and the farmer, whose name was John, told us about his farm. He explained how he grew the tomatoes using organic methods, without any chemicals. John even invited us to visit his farm later in the week to see how the tomatoes were grown. It was nice to meet someone so passionate about his work, and we agreed to take him up on his offer. After spending some time at the market, we decided to take a break and sit in the village square. There was a small cafe with tables set up outside, and we ordered some coffee and tea. As we sat down, we could hear the sound of children playing in the distance and the chatter of people enjoying their day. The atmosphere was so relaxing. It was clear that in Greenhill, life moved at a slower pace, and the people here valued their time and relationships with each other. While we sat, Mr. Thomas shared more stories about his life in the village. He told us that he had grown up here and had never lived anywhere else. He spoke fondly of his childhood, when he would run around the village with his friends, playing games and exploring the countryside. His stories reminded me of my own childhood, when I would spend time outside with my friends, exploring the parks and forests near my house. It made me realize how important it is to spend time in nature and to enjoy the simple pleasures of life. As we continued to talk, Mrs. Thomas joined us with a basket of homemade cookies. She had baked them earlier in the day, and they smelled amazing. We all enjoyed the cookies with our drinks and shared more stories about our lives. Sarah and I talked about our experiences in the city, and Mr. and Mrs. Thomas shared more about their life in the countryside. It was so interesting to hear about their different experiences, and it made me appreciate how diverse life can be, even in different parts of the same country. After our break, we decided to visit the local chapel. It was a beautiful building, with tall stained glass windows and a peaceful atmosphere. We walked inside and took a moment to admire the artwork and the peaceful environment. It was a place of quiet reflection, and we all sat for a moment in silence. Mr. Thomas told us that the chapel had been a place of comfort and support for the villagers during difficult times. Many people came here to pray, seek guidance, or simply find a moment of peace. It was a nice reminder of the importance of having a place to reflect and recharge, no matter where you are. As we left the chapel, we took a short walk to a nearby hill where we could see the whole village. From the top, we could see the fields, the village houses, the market square, and the church in the distance. The view was breathtaking. It was easy to see why people loved living in Greenhill. The landscape was beautiful, and the village felt like a close-knit community. Mr. Thomas said that the hill was his favorite place to come and think. He often visited to clear his mind and appreciate the beauty around him. We stayed at the top of the hill for a while, taking in the view and enjoying the fresh air. Sarah and I talked about how different life was here compared to the busy city life we were used to. It was a reminder of how important it is to slow down and appreciate the small moments in life. We talked about how we would take some of the peacefulness of Green Hill with us when we returned home. Later that afternoon, we made our way back to the guest house. The day had been full of experiences, walking through the village, meeting the locals, visiting the chapel, and enjoying the countryside. We felt grateful for the opportunity to see this side of life. As we walked back, I couldn't help but think about how much I had learned in just a few days. I had learned about the importance of nature, the value of community, and the simple pleasures of life. That evening, we had a delicious dinner at the guest house. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas had prepared a traditional countryside meal with fresh vegetables, homemade bread, and roasted meat. The meal was delicious, and we all sat together at the table, enjoying the food and each other's company. It was a perfect end to a perfect day. After dinner, we decided to take another walk around the village. The streets were quiet, and the village looked even more beautiful at night, with the lights from the houses shining in the distance. It was a peaceful moment, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. As we walked, I asked Sarah what her favorite part of the day had been. She thought for a moment and said, "I think it was the time we spent by the stream in the forest. It was so peaceful, and it felt like we were the only ones there." I agreed. That had been one of my favorite moments too. The quiet of the forest, the sound of the stream, and the peacefulness of the surroundings had made it a special experience. Now, I want to ask you, what about you? Have you ever spent time in the countryside, walking through nature, or exploring small villages? What did you enjoy most about it? If you haven't had that experience yet, imagine what it would be like. What would you do? Where would you go? Practice your English by describing your ideal day in the countryside. The next day, we woke up early, eager to experience more of Green Hill. The sun was shining brightly through the windows, and the birds were already awake, chirping away. It was the perfect start to another beautiful day in the countryside. We had breakfast with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, and as usual, they were full of energy and ready to show us more of the village. After breakfast, we decided to take a longer walk. This time, Mr. Thomas suggested we visit a nearby forest. He explained that the forest was a special place, full of tall trees, winding paths, and a stream that ran through it. He said it was a peaceful spot where many locals like to go for walks, have picnics, or just spend some quiet time. Sarah and I were excited about this plan, as we both loved being outdoors and surrounded by nature. We grabbed our backpacks, filled with some snacks and water, and set off toward the forest. The path was narrow and winding, with the occasional rabbit or squirrel running across. The air smelled fresh, and the sounds of the forest surrounded us, the rustling leaves, the birds singing, and the distant sound of the stream. It was a far cry from the busy streets of the city, and we both felt a sense of calm and happiness. As we walked deeper into the forest, we came to a clearing by the stream. The water was clear and sparkling in the sunlight, and we could see fish swimming lazily in the shallows. The trees were tall, their leaves creating a natural canopy above us. Mr. Thomas mentioned that this spot had been here for hundreds of years, and it was a place of great beauty and peace. We sat down on the grass by the stream and took in the surroundings. It was such a quiet, peaceful place. We all sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the sound of the water and the birds in the trees. It felt like the world had slowed down, and it made me realize how important it was to take breaks and enjoy nature. I shared my thoughts with Sarah, and she agreed. We both felt that spending time in nature like this was good for our mental health. It allowed us to relax, recharge, and simply enjoy the beauty of the world around us. After spending some time at the stream, we decided to continue our walk. Mr. Thomas led us to a part of the forest where there was a small wooden bridge crossing the stream. The bridge was old, but it looked sturdy. As we crossed it, Sarah and I joked about how it looked like something from an adventure movie. We laughed, and it was nice to feel so carefree in such a beautiful setting. On the other side of the bridge, the forest became even denser. The trees were thick, their branches twisting and turning above us. There were few paths, and we had to step carefully over the roots and rocks. Mr. Thomas pointed out different plants and trees, explaining their names and how they grew. It was like a living classroom, and I was amazed by all the knowledge he had about the forest. As we walked, we came across a small waterfall. It wasn't very big, but the sound of the water rushing over the rocks was calming and soothing. Sarah and I stood there for a moment, watching the water as it cascaded down into the pool below. It was a beautiful sight, and it reminded me of how important it was to find moments of peace in our busy lives. As we ate, we talked about our plans for the next day. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas suggested we visit a nearby village for a traditional market day. The village was known for its handmade crafts and local products, and they thought it would be a fun experience. Sarah and I were excited about the idea and agreed to go. After dinner, we went for a walk around the village, enjoying the calm night air. The streets were quiet and the houses were lit by soft, warm lights. We stopped for a moment to admire the view of the stars in the clear sky. It was a peaceful end to a wonderful day. The next morning, we set off early for the nearby village. The journey was short, but beautiful, and as we drove, Mr. Thomas pointed out more interesting sights along the way. He told us about the history of the village we were visiting, how it had been established hundreds of years ago, and how the community had worked together to build a strong, supportive environment. We arrived at the market and were immediately impressed by how lively it was. Stalls were filled with handmade crafts, fresh produce, and local products. There was a sense of community in the air, and we felt like we were part of something special. We spent the morning exploring the market, talking to the vendors, and buying some souvenirs to take home. It was a great way to end our trip to the countryside, and we both agreed that we would miss the peacefulness and beauty of Green Hill. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever visited a small village or spent time in the countryside? What did you do there? How did it make you feel? If you haven't had that experience yet, what would you like to do if you had the chance? Think about the activities you would enjoy and practice describing them in English. The next day, after a restful night's sleep, we decided to explore some more of Green Hill. The morning air was crisp and refreshing, and as we left the guest house, we could already feel the excitement building for another adventure. Mrs. Thomas had prepared a lovely breakfast for us: fresh bread, butter, jam, and eggs. It was a simple but delicious meal, and we all sat around the table, enjoying the warmth of the food and the cozy atmosphere. Over breakfast, Mr. Thomas told us about some hidden gems in the countryside that we hadn't seen yet. One place he recommended was a peaceful hilltop that provided a panoramic view of the village and the fields around it. He explained that from the hilltop, you could see the whole landscape stretching out, with the green fields, the small houses, and even the distant woods. Sarah and I were eager to go, and we quickly agreed to take a walk up to the hill. After breakfast, we packed a small bag with some snacks and water, and we set off toward the hill. The path to the hill was a little steeper than we expected, but it wasn't too difficult. We passed by more farms, with cows grazing peacefully and chickens pecking around the yard. The houses we passed were all made of stone or brick, with red roofs and neat gardens. It was easy to see that the people in this village took great pride in their homes and their land. As we climbed higher, the view started to open up. The houses below us began to look smaller, and the green fields spread out in every direction. The sky was a deep blue, and the sun was shining brightly. There were a few clouds in the sky, but they were fluffy and white, adding to the beauty of the scene. It felt like we were walking in a painting. Everything looked so perfect and peaceful. When we finally reached the top of the hill, we were all breathless but happy. The view was even more stunning than we had imagined. We could see the whole village of Green Hill, with its small streets, the church at the center, and the winding river that passed through the area. In the distance, there were rolling hills and thick forests, their green colors blending into the horizon. It was the kind of view that made you feel small and connected to the world at the same time. We spent some time at the top, taking photos, talking about how lucky we were to be there, and just enjoying the moment. It was so peaceful. There was no rush, no noise, just the sound of the wind and the occasional bird flying overhead. It felt like a perfect escape from the busy life we had back home. Sarah shared with me how she felt about this experience. She said, "It's hard to explain, but being up here just makes everything feel so simple. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just the view, the air, and the feeling of being at peace." I agreed with her completely. There was something magical about being in nature, away from the distractions of everyday life. After a while, we decided to head back down, but we weren't in any hurry. The walk down the hill was much easier, and we took our time, enjoying the beauty of the surroundings. As we walked, we talked more about how different life was here compared to the city. The pace of life was slower, and the people seemed more relaxed. It was clear that the countryside offered a lifestyle that many people in the city could only dream of. When we returned to the village, we felt like we had experienced something truly special. Mr. and Mrs. Thomas were waiting for us, and we were eager to share our adventure with them. They were happy to hear about our experience and suggested we take a break before going on our next adventure. They recommended we visit a local farm where we could see how people here grew their food and took care of the animals. We were excited about the idea, so we decided to spend the afternoon at the farm. The farm was only a short walk from the guest house, so we made our way over after resting for a bit. As we arrived, we were greeted by the farmer, a friendly man named James, who introduced us to his animals. He had cows, sheep, chickens, and even a few pigs. Sarah and I were both fascinated by the animals, and we asked James a lot of questions about how he took care of them. James explained that he had been running the farm for many years, and that it was a family business passed down from generation to generation. He shared stories about the history of the farm and how the land had changed over time. As we toured the farm, we learned a lot about farming life. We saw how the animals were fed, how the crops were grown, and how everything on the farm worked together to create a sustainable way of life. One of the most interesting parts of the tour was when James showed us how the cows were milked. He explained the process in detail, and Sarah and I had the chance to try milking a cow ourselves. It was harder than it looked, but we had fun trying. James also taught us about the different types of milk and how it's used in making cheese and other dairy products. We were amazed at how much work went into running a farm, and it made us appreciate the food we eat even more. After the tour, James invited us to sit down for a simple meal made from fresh ingredients grown on the farm. It was a delicious meal. Fresh bread, cheese, vegetables, and homemade jam. We all sat together at a long wooden table, enjoying the food and the company. It felt so satisfying to eat food that had been grown and prepared right there on the farm. The whole experience gave us a deeper understanding of where our food comes from and how much effort is put into making sure we have fresh, healthy ingredients to eat. As the day came to a close, we walked back to the guest house, feeling grateful for the amazing experiences we had in Greenhill. It had been a day full of new discoveries, beautiful views, peaceful moments, and a deeper connection to nature. We both agreed that this trip had been one of the most memorable of our lives. It had reminded us of the simple joys in life, like spending time in nature, connecting with people, and appreciating the beauty of the world around us. Now, I want to ask you, have you ever visited a farm or spent time learning about where your food comes from? What did you learn from that experience? If you haven't had that opportunity yet, what would you like to know about farming and the countryside? Take a moment to think about it and practice describing your experience in English. The next day, we decided to explore more of the countryside, as we hadn't seen everything Greenhill had to offer. We woke up early to make the most of the day. Mrs. Thomas, the owner of the guest house, had prepared another wonderful breakfast. For us, this time it was warm porridge, served with fresh fruit and honey. We sat at the dining table, enjoying the food and chatting about what we wanted to do that day. Mrs. Thomas mentioned a local market in a nearby village, and we thought it would be a great way to learn more about the area. After breakfast, we walked to the village market, which was about a half-hour's walk from Greenhill. On the way there, we passed more farms and fields with the sun shining brightly overhead. It was such a peaceful walk, with the only sounds being the birds singing and the rustling of the leaves in the trees. We talked about the things we had seen and how nice it was to be in a place so quiet and calm compared to the hustle and bustle of the city. When we reached the market, we were surprised by how busy it was. There were many stalls selling fresh vegetables, fruits, homemade jams, bread, and local crafts. The smell of fresh food filled the air, and it was easy to see that. This was a very important part of life in the village. People were chatting with each other, picking out fresh produce, and haggling over prices. It felt very different from the markets back home, which were often crowded and noisy. Sarah and I decided to take a look around and see what we could find. We first visited a stall selling fresh vegetables. The vegetables were so vibrant in color: deep green lettuce, bright red tomatoes, and golden carrots. The farmer at the stall was an older man named Mr. Williams, who smiled at us and welcomed us to his stall. He explained that his farm was just down the road and that everything he sold was grown without any chemicals. He even offered us a taste of his tomatoes, which were incredibly sweet and juicy. We couldn't resist and bought a few to take back to the guest house. Next, we visited a stall where a lady named Mrs. Bennett was selling homemade jams. She had a variety of jams: strawberry, raspberry, and even some unusual flavors like apple and cinnamon. We spent a few minutes talking with her, and she shared stories about how she learned to make jam from her grandmother. Sarah and I decided to buy a jar of the strawberry jam, which we were excited to try later. As we continued walking around the market, we noticed a stall selling handmade pottery. The pots and bowls were beautifully crafted, and each piece was unique. The seller, a young man named Tom, explained that he made everything by hand, and each piece took several days to complete. We were so impressed by his work that we decided to buy a small bowl to take home as a souvenir. It was a perfect reminder of our time in Greenhill. After spending some time at the market, we met up with Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, who had also been exploring the stalls. They were happy to see that we had enjoyed the market and bought some local products. They suggested we head to a nearby lake for a peaceful walk. We were all eager to explore more of the countryside, so we agreed and set off in the direction of the lake. The walk to the lake was a little longer, but it was worth every step. The path led us through dense woods with tall trees surrounding us on all sides. The air smelled fresh and earthy, and we could hear the crunch of leaves underfoot as we walked. We passed a few more farms along the way, and we even saw a family of deer grazing in a field. It was amazing to see wild animals in their natural habitat, and we stopped for a moment to admire the peaceful scene. When we arrived at the lake, it was even more beautiful than we had imagined. The water was calm and clear, reflecting the blue sky above. There were a few boats on the shore, but other than that, the lake was quiet and serene. We decided to take a short boat ride across the lake to enjoy the view from the water. The boat was small, but it felt safe and comfortable. As we paddled across the lake, we marveled at the stunning scenery: the trees surrounding the lake, the hills in the distance, and the birds flying overhead. It was the perfect place to relax and clear our minds. After our boat ride, we spent some time sitting by the lake, enjoying the peaceful surroundings. It was hard to believe how different life was here compared to the city. There was no rush, no traffic, and no noise, just the sound of nature all around us. Sarah and I both agreed that this was the perfect place to unwind and forget about the stress of daily life. As we sat by the lake, Mr. Thomas began telling us more about the history of Greenhill and the surrounding area. He explained that the village had been around for centuries and that many of the farms had been passed down from generation to generation. He also shared stories about the local traditions and festivals that took place throughout the year. Meaning to was clear that the people of Greenhill took great pride in their village and their heritage. We spent several hours at the lake, enjoying the beauty of the area and learning more about the local culture. As the sun began to set, we decided to head back to the guest house. The walk back was peaceful, and we talked about how much we had learned and experienced during our time in the countryside. We agreed that we had seen a side of life that we hadn't expected, and it was something we would never forget. When we returned to the guest house, Mrs. Thomas had prepared a delicious dinner for us. It was a hearty meal: roast chicken with vegetables, mashed potatoes, and a fresh salad. We all sat around the table, sharing our experiences from the day and talking about what we wanted to do the next day. It was clear that we had all fallen in love with Greenhill and its peaceful way of life. That night, as we went to bed, I couldn't help but think about how different life in the countryside was compared to the busy, fast-paced life back home. There was something special about the simplicity of it all, being surrounded by nature, spending time with kind and welcoming people, and taking the time to enjoy the small moments in life. It reminded me of the importance of slowing down and appreciating the world around us. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my trip to the countryside. It's always refreshing to experience a slower pace of life and connect with nature. Maybe this story inspired you to think about your own ideal getaway or how you can escape the fast pace of daily life from time to time. Before we finish today, I want to remind you that practicing your listening skills, like we did today, is an important step in improving your English. When you listen to real-life stories and examples, you get a better sense of how the language is used naturally. So keep listening, keep practicing, and don't forget to press the like button if you enjoyed the episode. And if you're new to the English Pod community, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. We upload videos regularly to help you improve your English skills every day. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.